The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, and I nearly threw it in the trash with the rest of the junk mail before I noticed the Homeowners Association seal stamped across the front in angry red ink. My name is Ethan Zimmerman, and I had been living in the Meadowbrook Hills community in Scottsdale, Arizona, for 3 years without any major issues. Sure, the HOA had their quirks, sending passive-aggressive reminders about lawn height and acceptable mailbox colors, but nothing prepared me for what I was about to read. I tore open the envelope while standing in my kitchen, coffee still brewing behind me, and felt my jaw drop as I scanned the contents. Notice of violation and fine. Excessive noise disturbance emanating from residential property workshop. Fine amount, $500. Additional daily fines of $100 will accrue until violation is remedied. I read it twice, then 3 times, because surely this had to be some kind of mistake. The noise they were complaining about, the hammering and sawing and drilling that had apparently disturbed the delicate sensibilities of my neighbors, was coming from my detached garage, where I had been spending 12-hour days for the past 2 weeks building the new playground equipment for the community park. The same playground equipment that the HOA had specifically commissioned me to build. The same playground equipment that I was constructing for free, donating my time and expertise as a professional carpenter, because I believed in giving back to the community. I grabbed my phone and immediately dialed the HOA office number printed at the bottom of the letter. A chipper voice answered on the 3rd ring. Meadowbrook Hills HOA, this is Jennifer speaking. How may I help you today? Hi Jennifer, this is Ethan Zimmerman over on Sagaro Drive. I just received a noise violation notice, and there must be some kind of mistake. Let me pull up your file, she said, and I could hear the clicking of keyboard keys. Ah yes, Mr. Zimmerman. The violation was filed by our board president, Patricia Whitmore. She documented excessive workshop noise on multiple occasions over the past 2 weeks. That's what I'm calling about, I said, trying to keep my voice level. I'm building the playground equipment for the community park. The HOA approved this project. I have emails. There was a long pause. I'm not showing any notes about that in our system. Would you like to schedule a meeting with Mrs. Whitmore to discuss this? Yes, absolutely. As soon as possible. She has an opening Thursday at 2 in the afternoon. I glanced at my workshop calendar hanging on the wall. Thursday was 2 days away, and I had planned to finish the main climbing structure by then. That's fine. I'll be there. After hanging up, I immediately went to my home office and started printing out every email, every text message, and every piece of documentation I had regarding the playground project. The initial request had come through 3 months ago when the HOA board had announced they were looking for volunteers to help renovate the outdated community park. The old playground had been deemed unsafe, with rusted chains on the swings and splintered wood on the play structures. Rather than hiring a commercial company to install generic plastic equipment, they wanted something unique and custom-built. I had submitted a proposal offering to design and construct the entire playground myself. I had been a carpenter for 15 years, specializing in custom furniture and outdoor structures. My portfolio included elaborate tree houses, gazebos, and even a small amphitheater for a local school. The playground would be my gift to the community, my way of contributing something lasting and meaningful. The HOA board had accepted my proposal enthusiastically, with multiple board members sending congratulatory emails about how lucky they were to have such a talented resident. Patricia Whitmore herself had sent me an email calling the project a wonderful addition to our beautiful community, and thanking me for your generous spirit and craftsmanship. That email was dated 6 weeks ago. I spent the rest of Tuesday organizing my documentation into a neat folder, creating a timeline of events, and taking photographs of the playground components I had already completed. The main structure was a castle-themed climbing frame with multiple towers, slides, and rope bridges. Everything was being built to exceed current safety standards, with smooth edges, proper spacing to prevent head entrapment, and treated lumber that would last for decades. I had already completed 2 of the 4 towers and was halfway through the main platform section. Wednesday passed in a blur of continued work. I figured if they were going to fine me anyway, I might as well make progress on the project. Every piece of wood I cut, every screw I drove, every joint I assembled was documented with time-stamped photos. Around 3 in the afternoon, I heard a car pull into my driveway. Looking through the window, I saw a silver Mercedes with a custom license plate reading Ho Queen. This was going to be interesting. I walked outside to find a woman in her early 50s stepping out of the car. Her blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun, wearing a white pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. She held a tablet in one hand and her phone in the other, her face already set in an expression of practiced disapproval. "Mr. Zimmerman, I presume," she said without offering a handshake. "That would be me. And you must be Patricia Whitmore, Mrs. Whitmore, if you please. I'm here to personally document this continued violation of community standards." She held up her tablet, and I could see she was recording video. "Despite receiving official notice of your violation, you have continued to generate excessive noise that disturbs the peaceful enjoyment of neighboring properties. Mrs. Whitmore, I'm building the playground equipment that your board approved. The noise is temporary and necessary to complete the project." Her expression didn't change. "I have no record of any such approval. What I do have is multiple complaints from residents about disruptive construction noise during what should be quiet residential hours." "I have emails," I said, feeling my patience starting to fray. "I have your email specifically, thanking me for taking on this project." "I send many emails, Mr. Zimmerman. I cannot be expected to remember every correspondence. What I can tell you is that our community guidelines clearly state that commercial workshop activities are prohibited on residential properties. This isn't commercial. I'm not making any money from this. I'm volunteering. The nature of the activity is commercial in scope, regardless of financial compensation. You are operating what amounts to a construction business from your garage, and that violates Section 7, Paragraph 3 of our community covenants." I took a deep breath, counting to 5 before responding. "We have a meeting scheduled for Thursday at 2. Can we please discuss this then, with all the documentation present? The meeting is simply a formality, Mr. Zimmerman. The violation stands and the fines will continue to accrue until you cease this activity." She lowered her tablet, having apparently captured enough footage for her purposes. "I suggest you hire a commercial facility to complete whatever project you believe you're working on. Good day." She climbed back into her Mercedes and drove away, leaving me standing in my driveway with a growing sense that this situation was spiraling into something much more complicated than a simple misunderstanding. That evening, I called my neighbor Marcus, who lived 3 houses down and had served on the HOA board until last year. We had become friends over backyard barbecues and the occasional weekend golf game. He answered on the first ring, and I dove straight into explaining the situation. Wait, Marcus interrupted. "Patricia is claiming she doesn't remember approving the playground project." "That's exactly what she's saying. She showed up at my house this afternoon with a tablet, recording me like I'm running some kind of illegal operation." Marcus let out a long whistle. Man, I hate to say this, but this sounds like vintage Patricia. She did something similar to the Hendersons last year, right before I left the board. It's one of the reasons I quit, actually. What happened with the Hendersons? They wanted to install solar panels. The board approved it. Patricia voted in favor herself. Then a month later, she hit them with violations for unapproved roof modifications and tried to fine them into removing the panels. Why would she do that? Because her brother-in-law owns a solar installation company, and he wanted the job. When the Hendersons went with a different company that gave them a better price, Patricia decided to make their lives miserable. They eventually moved out of the community rather than deal with her anymore. That's insane. That's Patricia, Marcus said. Look, I still have access to some of the old board files. Let me dig around and see what I can find about the playground project. There should be meeting minutes, email chains, all kinds of documentation. I'd really appreciate that. No problem. And Ethan, be careful with her. Patricia doesn't like being challenged, and she's gotten very good at using the HOA rules as weapons. Thursday arrived with typical Arizona sunshine, the temperature already pushing 90 degrees by noon. I dressed in business casual, khakis and a button-down shirt, and gathered my documentation folder along with my laptop. The HOA office was located in a small building near the community center, a single-story structure with desert landscaping and a fountain out front that never seemed to work properly. I arrived 10 minutes early and found Jennifer at the front desk. She looked up with a sympathetic smile. Mr. Zimmerman, Mrs. Whitmore is ready for you. Conference room B down the hall on the left. The conference room was small and windowless, with a table that could seat 6 people. Patricia sat at the head of the table with 2 other board members flanking her. I recognized one of them, Gerald Peterson, a retired accountant who had always seemed reasonable in previous interactions. The other was a younger woman I didn't know, maybe in her 30s, with dark hair and an expression that suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. Mr. Zimmerman, thank you for coming, Patricia said with false warmth. Please have a seat. This is Gerald Peterson, our treasurer, and Amanda Morris, our secretary. We're here to discuss your violation and determine next steps. I sat down and placed my folder on the table. Thank you for meeting with me. I believe there's been a significant misunderstanding about the nature of my workshop activities. Please explain, Gerald said, leaning forward with his hands clasped. I opened the folder and began laying out documents. 3 months ago, the HOA board put out a call for volunteers to help with the community park renovation. The old playground was being decommissioned due to safety concerns. I submitted a proposal to design and build new playground equipment as a donation to the community. This proposal was reviewed and approved by the board, with multiple members expressing enthusiasm for the project. I slid printed emails across the table. Here are the initial communications. Here's the email from Mrs. Whitmore herself, thanking me for my generous spirit and craftsmanship. Here's the technical proposal I submitted, including detailed drawings, materials lists, and a construction timeline. And here are the follow-up emails confirming the project start date and addressing questions about insurance and liability. Patricia barely glanced at the documents. I have no recollection of these communications. Amanda picked up one of the emails, studying it carefully. This has your email address, Patricia, and your signature block. Email addresses can be spoofed, Patricia said dismissively. This is clearly some kind of fabrication. I felt my face flush with anger but forced myself to remain calm. Are you accusing me of forging these emails? I'm saying that I would never approve such a project without proper commercial licensing, permits, and insurance documentation. The liability alone would be astronomical. Gerald picked up the technical proposal, flipping through pages of detailed drawings. Patricia, I remember this. We discussed it at the March meeting. You were very excited about having custom-built equipment instead of the generic stuff. I think you're mistaken, Gerald. I'm not mistaken. I specifically remember because you talked about how it would increase property values and make great material for our community newsletter. Patricia's expression hardened. Regardless of past conversations, the current situation remains unchanged. Mr. Zimmerman is operating a commercial workshop from his residential property, generating excessive noise that disturbs neighbors. Multiple complaints have been filed. Who complained? I asked. Can I see the complaints? That information is confidential to protect the privacy of our residents. So I'm being fined based on anonymous complaints. The complaints are not anonymous to the board, only to you. Amanda cleared her throat. Actually, Patricia, the covenants state that residents have a right to face their accusers in violation proceedings. If there are complaints, Mr. Zimmerman should be able to know who filed them. Patricia shot Amanda a look that could have melted steel. That's a guideline, not a requirement. It's actually in Section 12 of the bylaws, Amanda said, her voice quiet but firm. She pulled out her own laptop and turned it to show Patricia. Right here, any resident facing fines has the right to review the complaints against them. The room fell silent for a moment. I could see Patricia's jaw working, her mind clearly racing to find another angle. Finally, she said, "Very well. The complaints were filed by Dorothy Richardson and Harold Chen." I knew both of those names. Dorothy Richardson lived 2 streets over, at least a quarter mile from my house. There was no way she could hear my workshop from her property. Harold Chen lived even farther away, on the opposite side of the community near the golf course. "Mrs. Richardson lives on Palo Verde Drive," I said. "That's nowhere near my house." How could she possibly hear workshop noise from that distance? "She was visiting a friend on your street," Patricia said quickly. "And Harold Chen, he was jogging past your property when he heard the disturbance." Gerald was frowning now, looking at Patricia with obvious skepticism. "Patricia, this seems pretty thin. If the noise wasn't actually disturbing immediate neighbors, I'm not sure we have grounds for a violation." "The community standards don't require proximity," Patricia snapped. "Any resident who experiences a disturbance has the right to file a complaint." I pulled out my phone and opened the voice memo app. "I'd like this meeting to be recorded for accuracy if no one objects." "I object," Patricia said immediately. "On what grounds?" Amanda asked. "Board meetings are supposed to be transparent. This isn't a board meeting. This is a violation hearing, which residents are allowed to record, according to Section 14. Amanda was really coming through for me, and I made a mental note to thank her later if this situation ever resolved in my favor. Patricia stood up abruptly. "This hearing is over. The violation stands, the fines stand, and Mr. Zimmerman has 7 days to cease all workshop activities or face additional penalties, including possible legal action." "Legal action for building a playground that you approved," I said, standing as well. "That's your position." "My position is that you are in violation of community standards, and as board president, I have the authority to enforce those standards. Good day, Mr. Zimmerman." She swept out of the room, leaving Gerald and Amanda sitting at the table looking uncomfortable. Gerald turned to me with an apologetic expression. "Ethan, I'm sorry about this. Let me do some digging into the meeting minutes and see what I can find. This doesn't sit right with me." "I appreciate that, Gerald. I just want to finish the playground. Kids in this community deserve a safe place to play." "I know. Give me a few days to work on Patricia. Maybe I can talk some sense into her." I left the HOA office feeling frustrated but not defeated. Something was seriously wrong with Patricia's behavior, and I was determined to figure out what it was. When I got home, I found Marcus sitting on my front porch with a cardboard box. "I found something interesting," he said by way of greeting. "You're going to want to see this." We went inside, and Marcus opened the box to reveal stacks of printed documents, meeting minutes, and financial reports. I still had copies of a bunch of board materials from my time serving. It's all technically public record anyway, so don't worry about confidentiality. Look at this. He pulled out a document dated 4 months ago, meeting minutes from a full board session. Highlighted in yellow was a section discussing the playground project. The minutes clearly showed that my proposal had been presented, discussed, and approved with a unanimous vote. Patricia's name was listed as present and voting in favor. "That's perfect," I said. "This proves she approved it. It gets better. Look at this." Marcus pulled out another document, this one a financial report. About 6 months ago, the board allocated $15,000 for the playground renovation. That money came from the Community Improvement Fund, which is collected through HOA dues. Okay, so they had a budget for it. Right. But here's the interesting part. Look at this expense report from last month. He laid out another sheet. Patricia authorized a payment of $12,000 to a company called Desert Play Solutions for playground equipment consultation and design. I felt my stomach drop, but I was doing the design for free. Exactly. So where did that $12,000 go? Marcus tapped the document. I looked up Desert Play Solutions. Want to guess who owns it? Patricia's husband. Close. Her son, Bradley Whitmore. The company was registered 3 months ago, right around the time your proposal was being approved. Everything suddenly clicked into place. Patricia had approved my project initially, probably thinking she could cancel it later and redirect the money to her son's new company. But I had already started work, and the community was aware of the project. So instead of openly canceling it, she was trying to find me into stopping, creating a paper trail that made it look like I was the problem. Then she could claim the volunteer option hadn't worked out and convince the board to hire her son's company instead. Marcus, you're a genius. Can I get copies of all this? Already made them for you. I figured you'd need ammunition. I need to take this to the full board, get them to see what Patricia's doing. That might be harder than you think. Patricia controls the meeting agendas, and she can basically decide what gets discussed and what doesn't. You'd need to force a special meeting, which requires either a petition from 20% of residents or a vote from 3 board members. What about Gerald and Amanda? They seemed reasonable. Gerald definitely. Amanda's new to the board, only been on it for 2 months, but she seems like she has a spine. The problem is there are 5 board members total, and the other 2 are basically Patricia's puppets. She handpicked them. I spent the rest of Thursday evening researching the HOA bylaws and Arizona state law regarding homeowners associations. What I found was both encouraging and frustrating. Arizona law actually provided strong protections for homeowners against HOA overreach, but enforcing those protections often required legal action, which meant lawyers and court costs. The bylaws did allow for residents to petition for special meetings and to challenge board decisions, but the process was bureaucratic and time-consuming. By Friday morning, I had formulated a plan. I would continue working on the playground, document everything meticulously, and prepare a presentation for the next regular board meeting. In the meantime, I would reach out to other residents, explain the situation, and build support. If Patricia wanted to play hardball, I would show her that I could play too. I sent emails to every contact I had in the community, explaining the situation in straightforward terms. I included photos of the playground components I had built, copies of the original approval emails, and Marcus's discovery about the payment to Patricia's son's company. I didn't make accusations, just laid out the facts and asked for support. The response was overwhelming. Within hours, my inbox was flooded with replies from neighbors expressing outrage at Patricia's behavior. Several people mentioned their own negative experiences with her, including rejected requests for reasonable home improvements and arbitrary fines for trivial violations. A few residents offered to help with the playground construction, turning it into a true community project. By Friday afternoon, I had more than 30 volunteers ready to help and over 100 residents who had signed a digital petition supporting the playground project and demanding accountability from the board. The momentum was building, and I could feel the tide starting to turn. Saturday morning, I woke up to find my workshop door standing open. At first, I thought I had forgotten to close it the night before, but as I approached, I realized the lock had been forced. Inside, someone had done significant damage. Tools were scattered everywhere. Wood had been deliberately broken, and someone had spray painted "Cease Illegal Operations" across my workbench in bright red letters. I immediately called the Scottsdale Police Department. While I waited for officers to arrive, I walked through the space, taking photos and videos of everything. The damage was extensive but targeted. They had broken several pieces of the playground equipment I had already completed, focusing on joints and connection points that would be difficult to repair. Plans and drawings had been torn down from the walls. My table saw had been tampered with. The blade loosened in a way that could have caused serious injury if I had started it up without checking. 2 officers arrived within 20 minutes. A younger guy named Officer Ramirez and his partner, Officer Chen. A woman in her 40s with sharp eyes that took in every detail. I walked them through the workshop, explaining what had been damaged and showing them the before photos on my phone. "Do you have any idea who might have done this?" Officer Chen asked. "I have suspicions, but no proof," I said carefully. I explained the situation with the HOA, the fines, and the meeting where Patricia had essentially threatened me. "I'm not saying she did this personally, but she's been very aggressive about stopping this project." "Has she threatened you directly?" Officer Ramirez asked, taking notes. "Not in so many words, but she's made it clear she wants the workshop activity stopped, and now this happens." Officer Chen examined the forced lock. This was done with a pry bar or similar tool, not particularly sophisticated but effective. "Do you have security cameras?" "No, I never thought I'd need them in this neighborhood." "You might want to consider it now," she said. "We'll file a report, but without witnesses or video evidence, it's going to be hard to identify who did this. The spray paint might have fingerprints. We'll have a tech come out and dust for prints, see if we get lucky." The officers spent another 30 minutes documenting the scene, taking their own photos, and collecting the spray paint that had been left behind. Officer Chen gave me a case number and her card. "If you remember anything else, or if you receive any threats, call me directly. And seriously, get some cameras installed." After the police left, I started the depressing work of assessing the damage. Several hours of work had been destroyed, and I would need to rebuild multiple components from scratch. The table saw was the biggest concern. If I hadn't noticed the loosened blade, the saw could have kicked back during operation and seriously injured me or anyone else in the workshop. That last thought made my blood run cold. This wasn't just property damage. Someone had actively tried to create a dangerous situation. This had escalated beyond fines and bureaucratic harassment into something criminal. I called Marcus and told him what had happened. He arrived 15 minutes later, took one look at the workshop and said, "You're calling a lawyer, right? That's my next call." Good. This is beyond HOA nonsense now. This is criminal. I spent Sunday installing security cameras around my property, including 2 covering the workshop, 1 facing the driveway and 1 covering the front door. They were wireless, uploaded to cloud storage, and had motion detection. If anyone came near my property again, I would have video evidence. I also contacted a lawyer, a woman named Rachel Turner who specialized in HOA disputes and property law. She agreed to meet with me Monday morning for a consultation. In the meantime, I continued reaching out to community members, and the petition supporting the playground project grew to over 200 signatures, nearly 40% of the total households in Meadowbrook Hills. Monday's meeting with Rachel Turner was eye-opening. She listened to my entire story, reviewed all my documentation, and examined the photos of the workshop damage. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and shook her head. "Mr. Zimmerman, you have an incredibly strong case against the HOA board and specifically against Patricia Whitmore. What she's doing violates several Arizona statutes regarding HOA governance. The financial impropriety with her son's company is particularly serious. What are my options? Several, actually. First, we can file a formal complaint with the Arizona Department of Real Estate, which oversees HOA compliance. They can investigate the board's actions and impose penalties. Second, we can seek an injunction preventing the HOA from enforcing the fines or taking any action against you while the dispute is resolved. Third, we can pursue civil litigation for the property damage, harassment, and potentially fraud regarding the misappropriated funds. That sounds expensive. It can be. However, Arizona law allows for attorney's fees to be awarded in HOA disputes if you prevail. And given the strength of your case, I think you have an excellent chance of prevailing. There's also the option of going to the media. Local news stations love stories about HOA overreach and the angle of you volunteering to build a playground while being fined and harassed is very compelling. I thought about it for a moment. Let's start with the formal complaint and the injunction. I'd like to try to resolve this without it becoming a circus if possible. That's reasonable. I'll draft the complaint and the injunction request today. We should be able to file by tomorrow afternoon. Walking out of Rachel's office, I felt more confident than I had in days. I had professional help, documented evidence, and community support. Patricia Whitmore's scheme was about to unravel. Tuesday afternoon, I was in my workshop, repairing the damaged playground components, when my new security system alerted me to motion near the front of my property. I pulled up the camera feed on my phone and saw Patricia Whitmore's Mercedes pulling into my driveway. This time, she wasn't alone. A man in his late 20s got out of the passenger side, wearing an expensive suit and carrying a briefcase. I met them at the door before they could ring the bell. "Mrs. Whitmore, to what do I owe the pleasure? Mr. Zimmerman, this is my son, Bradley Whitmore. He's here to discuss a business proposal." Bradley extended his hand, and I shook it out of reflex more than courtesy. "Mr. Zimmerman, I understand there's been some conflict regarding the community playground project. I think I have a solution that could work for everyone. I'm listening. My company, Desert Play Solutions, specializes in custom playground design and installation. We'd like to offer you a position as a consultant on the project. You'd be paid for your time and expertise, and we'd handle all the construction and installation. This way, your vision for the playground would still be realized, but without the complications of the HOA violations." I almost laughed. "So let me get this straight. Your mother finds me and has my workshop vandalized to stop me from building the playground for free, and now you want to hire me to consult while your company gets paid to do the work I was already doing." Patricia's face went pale. "How dare you suggest that I had anything to do with the vandalism? That's slander. Actually, it would be libel if I wrote it down, and I'm not suggesting anything, just stating facts." I pulled out my phone and opened my email app. In fact, I've been documenting everything very carefully, including the fact that your son's company was paid $12,000 from the Community Improvement Fund for a project I was doing for free. Bradley's confident expression faltered. That payment was for legitimate design consultation services. Really? Can you show me the designs you created? The consultation reports you submitted? Any documentation of the work you supposedly did to earn that $12,000? Neither of them responded. Patricia recovered first, her face settling into cold anger. "This conversation is over. You have 72 hours to remove all playground materials from your property, or we will have them removed for you and add the cost to your fines." "You can't do that. It's my property." "The materials are being used for unauthorized commercial purposes, which makes them subject to HOA enforcement actions." "Good luck with that," I said. "My lawyer will be in touch." They left, and I immediately called Rachel Turner to tell her about the confrontation. She listened carefully, then said, "Perfect timing. The injunction was approved this afternoon. The HOA is prohibited from assessing any new fines against you or taking any enforcement action regarding the playground project until the hearing. I'm having the order delivered to their office right now." "When's the hearing?" 2 weeks from today. Judge Martinez is handling it. He's known for being very strict with HOAs that overstep their authority. I think we're in good shape. The next few days passed in a strange mixture of tension and productivity. I continued working on the playground, now with several volunteer neighbors helping. The security cameras captured Patricia driving past my house multiple times, always slowing down to stare at the workshop. I made sure to wave at the camera every time, knowing she could see the motion alerts. The community support continued to grow. A local news station got wind of the story and reached out for an interview. I agreed, and they sent a reporter named Diana Martinez to my house on Friday afternoon. She was in her 30s, professional but friendly, and clearly intrigued by the story. "So let me make sure I understand this correctly," she said as her cameraman filmed the partially completed playground components in my workshop. "You volunteered to build this playground for free, the HOA approved it, and then they started fining you for building it." "That's exactly what happened. And then they paid the board president's son $12,000 from community funds for consulting services on a project I was doing for free. That sounds like fraud. My lawyer seems to think so." The story aired on the evening news that night, and the response was immediate and overwhelming. My phone started ringing with calls from other residents, local newspapers, and even a few state representatives interested in HOA reform. The story hit social media and went viral locally, with thousands of people sharing it and commenting on the absurdity of the situation. By Saturday morning, the story had been picked up by regional news outlets and was starting to get national attention. I received a call from a producer at a national morning show asking if I would be interested in doing a satellite interview. The attention was becoming overwhelming, but I figured if it put pressure on the HOA to do the right thing, it was worth it. Monday morning, exactly 1 week before the scheduled hearing, I received a call from Gerald Peterson, the HOA treasurer. He sounded tired and frustrated. "Ethan, I need to meet with you. Are you available this afternoon?" "Sure. What's this about? I'd rather discuss it in person." Can you come to the community center at 3? I arrived at the community center to find Gerald waiting outside, looking nervous. He led me to one of the small meeting rooms and closed the door. "I'm going to be direct with you," he said. "Patricia needs to resign. What she's done is indefensible, and it's exposing the entire HOA to massive liability. Amanda and I have been reviewing the financials, and the payment to Bradley's company isn't the only irregularity we've found." "What else did you find?" "Multiple payments to vendors that either don't exist or never provided services. Patricia has been essentially embezzling from the HOA for at least the past year, possibly longer. We're talking about nearly $60,000 in fraudulent expenses." I let out a low whistle. "That's serious." "It's criminal. Amanda and I have already contacted the Arizona Department of Real Estate and filed a formal complaint. We've also referred the matter to the Scottsdale Police for investigation. But here's the thing, we want to try to minimize the damage to the community. If this goes to a full trial, it's going to cost the HOA a fortune in legal fees, and everyone's dues will have to increase to cover it. What are you proposing?" "We want Patricia to resign immediately and return all the money she's stolen. In exchange, we won't pursue criminal charges, although the state might still investigate. We're also prepared to drop all fines against you, issue a public apology, and compensate you for the damage to your workshop. We'd like you to continue with the playground project, and we'll provide materials funding from the Community Improvement Fund, which is what should have happened from the beginning. And Patricia has agreed to this." "Not yet. That's where you come in. If you agree to accept this resolution, Amanda and I will present it to the full board at an emergency meeting tomorrow night. With 3 votes, we can force Patricia out, but we need to know you're willing to accept the terms." I thought about it carefully. Part of me wanted to see Patricia face full criminal prosecution for what she had done. But Gerald was right that a protracted legal battle would hurt the community, and ultimately, I just wanted to finish the playground and move on with my life. "I'll accept the terms on one condition," I said. "Patricia has to publicly admit what she did, not in a legal document in person at a community meeting. Everyone needs to hear the truth." Gerald nodded slowly. "I can push for that. Let me talk to Amanda and see what we can do." The emergency board meeting was held Tuesday evening at 7 o'clock. The community center meeting room was packed with residents, easily over 100 people standing along the walls and crowding in through the doorway. I sat in the front row with Marcus on one side and Rachel Turner on the other. Patricia sat at the board table with Gerald, Amanda, and the 2 other board members, Richard Novick and Susan Palmer. Patricia looked composed but tired, dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite conceal. She avoided making eye contact with anyone in the audience. Gerald called the meeting to order and got straight to the point. "Thank you all for coming on short notice. We've called this emergency meeting to address serious concerns regarding board governance and financial management. Over the past week, Secretary Morris and I have been conducting a comprehensive review of HOA finances, and we've discovered significant irregularities." He went through the findings methodically, projecting documents on the screen behind the board table. The payment to Bradley Whitmore's company. Multiple checks written to non-existent vendors. Unauthorized salary increases that Patricia had given herself. Credit card charges for personal expenses. By the time Gerald finished, the room was buzzing with angry whispers. "The total amount of misappropriated funds is approximately $58,000, Gerald concluded. "This represents a serious breach of fiduciary duty and potential criminal fraud." Patricia finally spoke, her voice tight. "These allegations are completely false." Every expense was legitimate and properly documented. Amanda opened her laptop and turned it toward Patricia. Then perhaps you can explain this. This is an invoice from Cactus Landscaping Services for $8,000 in tree trimming. I called the company. They've never heard of Meadowbrook Hills HOA, and they have no record of any work performed here. That must be an error in their records. I have 6 similar examples, Amanda said. Companies that claim to have never worked for us, invoices for services that were never provided, checks written to cash for suspicious amounts. Patricia, this isn't an error. This is systematic theft. The room erupted in angry shouts. Several residents demanded answers. Others called for Patricia's immediate resignation. Gerald had to bang his gavel repeatedly to restore order. "We have a proposal," Gerald said once the room quieted down. "President Whitmore will resign immediately, return all misappropriated funds within 30 days, and issue a public apology. In exchange, the board will not pursue criminal charges, although we cannot control whether state authorities choose to investigate." Richard Novick, one of the board members who had been mostly silent during Patricia's reign, spoke up. "I move that we accept this proposal and demand President Whitmore's immediate resignation." "I second," Amanda said. "All in favor?" Gerald asked. 4 hands went up. Gerald, Amanda, Richard, and Susan. Only Patricia abstained, sitting rigid in her chair. The motion passes. Patricia Whitmore is removed as president of the Meadowbrook Hills HOA, effective immediately. "Mrs. Whitmore, you have 30 days to return the misappropriated funds. Failure to do so will result in immediate legal action." Patricia stood slowly, gathering her papers with shaking hands. As she moved toward the door, someone in the crowd shouted, "What about Ethan? What about the playground?" Gerald held up his hand. "That's our next order of business. Mr. Zimmerman, would you please come forward?" I stood and walked to the front of the room, my heart pounding. Gerald pulled out a document and handed it to me. "On behalf of the Meadowbrook Hills HOA, I want to formally apologize for the harassment and unjust fines you received. All fines are hereby voided, and the HOA will compensate you $5,000 for the damage to your workshop and your time. Additionally, we're approving a budget of $10,000 for materials and supplies to complete the playground project. We hope you'll continue to work on this important community improvement." The room burst into applause. I shook Gerald's hand, then Amanda's, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. It was finally over, except it wasn't quite over. Patricia had paused at the door, and now she turned back to face the crowd. For a moment I thought she might make a scene, but instead she just looked defeated. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I made mistakes. I'll return the money." Then she walked out, and I never saw her in the community again. The next 2 weeks were a blur of activity. With proper funding and community support, the playground project became a true neighborhood effort. Volunteers showed up every evening and all day on weekends. Someone brought a barbecue grill, and we turned it into a social event, with families working together, kids playing in the common areas, and everyone pitching in. The castle-themed structure started coming together beautifully. 4 towers connected by rope bridges and climbing nets, with slides descending from different levels. A separate section for younger kids featured lower platforms, easier climbs, and softer surfaces. Everything was built to commercial safety standards, with smooth edges, proper spacing, and cushioned ground cover. Local businesses heard about the project and donated materials. A lumber yard gave us treated posts and planking. A hardware store provided fasteners and tools. A painting company sent a crew to add colorful murals to the towers, transforming them into a proper fairy tale castle with dragons, knights, and princesses. 3 weeks after Patricia's resignation, we held a grand opening ceremony for the new playground. The weather was perfect, mid-70s with clear blue skies. The entire community turned out, along with local news crews and even the mayor of Scottsdale, who gave a short speech about community spirit and volunteerism. Gerald, now serving as interim HOA president, presented me with a plaque thanking me for my service to the community. It was a nice gesture, though honestly, seeing kids climbing the towers and racing down the slides was reward enough. The investigation into Patricia's financial impropriety continued beyond the community level. The Arizona Department of Real Estate launched a formal investigation, and the Scottsdale police assigned a detective to review the case. About 6 weeks after her resignation, I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that criminal charges had been filed. Patricia Whitmore was arrested on charges of theft, fraud, and embezzlement. Her son Bradley was also charged as an accomplice for his role in the fake consulting payments. The case made local news, though it didn't receive nearly as much attention as the original playground story. I followed the case with interest, but from a distance. According to court records that became public, Patricia eventually pleaded guilty to reduced charges and was sentenced to 18 months in jail, with 3 years of probation after release. She was also ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA, including interest and penalties. Bradley took a plea deal for probation and community service, since prosecutors couldn't prove he had been actively involved in the broader scheme. The money was eventually returned to the HOA, which used it to fund other community improvements, including new lighting for the walking paths and renovations to the community center. Property values in Meadowbrook Hills actually increased after Patricia's departure, as the community gained a reputation for strong resident engagement and successful grassroots projects. As for me, I completed the playground project and then took on a few more community improvement initiatives, though nothing quite as ambitious. I built new benches for the walking trails, created a small amphitheater for summer concerts, and helped design a community garden where residents could grow vegetables. The experience taught me a lot about standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult and expensive. It would have been easy to just pay the fines and stop working on the playground. But doing so would have let Patricia get away with her scheme and would have deprived the community of something valuable. I also learned that most people are fundamentally good and willing to help if they understand the situation. The overwhelming support I received from neighbors, the volunteers who showed up to help build, the local businesses that donated materials, all of it restored my faith in community. One evening about 3 months after the playground opened, I was walking past the park and saw a young girl, maybe 7 years old, climbing one of the towers. Her mother sat on a nearby bench, watching with a smile. The girl reached the top platform, looked around at the view, and shouted, "Mom, I'm a princess in a castle," her mother waved. "Yes, you are, sweetie." The girl then slid down the spiral slide, laughing the whole way, and ran back to do it again. I stood there watching for a few minutes, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. This was why I had built the playground. This moment right here. A kid having fun, creating memories, being active and engaged with the world. All the stress of dealing with Patricia, the fines, the legal threats, the vandalism, it was all worth it for this. Sometimes doing the right thing is hard. Sometimes it requires you to stand up to people with power and resources. Sometimes it means spending money on lawyers and dealing with bureaucracy and paperwork. But in the end, when you see the positive impact of your efforts, you realize it was all worthwhile. I walked home that evening with a smile on my face, already thinking about the next project I could tackle. The community bulletin board had mentioned that the tennis courts needed resurfacing. Maybe I could organize a fundraiser. Or perhaps we could convert one of the unused courts into a pickleball court, which seemed to be growing in popularity. Living in an HOA community meant dealing with rules and regulations, board politics, and neighborhood disputes. But it also meant being part of something larger than yourself, contributing to a shared space that everyone could enjoy. With the right leadership and community engagement, an HOA could be a positive force, funding improvements and maintaining standards that kept property values stable. The key was accountability. Patricia had been able to operate unchecked for too long because residents weren't paying attention to board activities and financial decisions. After the scandal, attendance at board meetings increased dramatically. Residents started reviewing financial reports and asking questions. Gerald implemented new transparency measures, including monthly financial summaries, posted to the community website and quarterly town halls where residents could voice concerns. Amanda Morris was elected as the new board president in a special election, and she brought a collaborative, open approach to leadership that was refreshing after Patricia's authoritarian style. She created committees for various community issues, giving more residents a voice in decisions. She also implemented term limits for board positions, ensuring that no one person could accumulate too much power. My own role in the community evolved. I was asked to serve on the Community Improvement Committee, helping to review and approve projects. I also became an informal consultant for residents dealing with HOA disputes, sharing what I had learned about navigating the bylaws and standing up for your rights. The workshop in my garage continued to be a source of creative projects. I built custom furniture for neighbors, crafted wooden signs for community events, and even created a little free library box that was installed near the playground. No one ever complained about the noise again. Marcus and I remained close friends, getting together most weekends for golf or just hanging out in one of our backyards. He took great pleasure in telling anyone who would listen about how he had helped uncover Patricia's financial crimes, though I always pointed out that the real credit belonged to Gerald and Amanda for following up on his discoveries. The playground became the heart of the community in ways I hadn't anticipated. Parents started organizing regular playdates there. The HOA sponsored summer movie nights, projecting films onto a portable screen set up near the playground. Kids' birthday parties were held there almost every weekend. The space brought people together and created a sense of community identity that had been lacking before. About 6 months after everything concluded, I received a letter from the Arizona Department of Real Estate. It was a formal commendation, thanking me for my patience and cooperation during their investigation into the Meadowbrook Hills HOA. The letter noted that my documented evidence and testimony had been instrumental in building their case against Patricia Whitmore and in identifying systemic issues with HOA oversight in Arizona. The letter went on to explain that my case had prompted a review of HOA regulations statewide and had contributed to new legislation being proposed that would strengthen homeowner protections and increase transparency requirements for HOA boards. It was gratifying to know that my experience might help prevent other homeowners from going through similar situations. Life in Meadowbrook Hills settled into a comfortable rhythm. The community thrived under new leadership. Property values increased. New families moved in, attracted by the tight-knit community feel and the excellent amenities. The playground I had built became a selling point for real estate agents showing houses in the neighborhood. I sometimes thought about Patricia and wondered how she was doing. Serving jail time at her age couldn't be easy, and she had lost everything: her position, her reputation, her freedom. Part of me felt sorry for her, despite everything she had done. She had made terrible choices driven by grade and ego, and she was paying a heavy price. But mostly, I focused on moving forward. The whole experience had taught me that you can't control other people's actions, only your own responses. When faced with injustice, you can either accept it or fight back. Fighting back is harder, messier, and more expensive. But it's also the only way real change happens. The playground stood as a testament to that principle. Every time I walked past it and saw kids playing, I was reminded that standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult, creates lasting positive impact. The structure would be there for years, maybe decades, serving families and bringing joy to children who weren't even born yet when I was building it. As for the HOA, it had been transformed from a source of conflict into a functioning community organization. Meetings were well attended, transparent, and productive. Decisions were made collaboratively, with input from residents. Finances were carefully managed and regularly audited. The nightmare of Patricia's presidency had ultimately led to positive reforms that made Meadowbrook Hills a better place to live. On the 1-year anniversary of the playground's opening, the community held a celebration. There was a potluck dinner, live music from a local band, and a ceremony where Gerald presented me with another plaque. This one had a photo of the completed playground and an inscription: "Built with dedication, perseverance, and community spirit. Thank you, Ethan Zimmerman." Standing in front of my neighbors, listening to their applause, I felt a profound sense of belonging. This was my community. These were my people. And together, we had overcome a difficult challenge and created something beautiful. The experience had started with an unjust fine, escalated into harassment and vandalism, exposed fraud and corruption, and ultimately led to criminal prosecution and community transformation. It was a wild ride that I wouldn't want to repeat, but I also wouldn't trade the outcome for anything. As the sun set over the Scottsdale Hills that evening, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, I stood near the playground watching kids play one last round before their parents called them in for the night. The castle towers cast long shadows across the playground surface, and the sound of children's laughter filled the air. This was what community was supposed to be about. Not petty rules and power-hungry board members, but people coming together to create spaces and experiences that enriched everyone's lives. The playground was a symbol of that ideal, a physical manifestation of what's possible when people work together toward a common goal. I walked home as the streetlights began to flicker on, feeling grateful for the whole experience, even the difficult parts. Sometimes the best outcomes emerge from the worst situations. Sometimes fighting back against injustice leads not just to personal victory, but to systemic change that benefits everyone. The workshop noise that Patricia had fined me for had long since ceased, replaced by the joyful sounds of children playing on the equipment I had built. And that, more than any legal victory or compensation, was the real triumph. I had set out to build a playground for my community, and despite every obstacle thrown in my way, I had succeeded. The story could have ended badly. I could have given up, paid the fines, and let Patricia's scheme succeed. But I didn't. I fought back, gathered evidence, sought help, and persevered. And in doing so, I not only protected myself but exposed corruption that was harming the entire community. As I reached my house and looked back toward the park one last time, I could still hear faint echoes of children playing. Tomorrow they would be back, and the next day, and the day after that. The playground would serve families for years to come. a lasting legacy of what one person can accomplish when they refuse to accept injustice and stand up for what's right. Living in an HOA community would always involve some level of bureaucracy and compromise. But it could also be a positive experience, a way to build connections with neighbors and contribute to a shared space that everyone could enjoy. The key was vigilance, engagement, and a willingness to hold leaders accountable. My garage workshop sat quiet now, tools cleaned and organized, ready for the next project. Whatever that project might be, I knew I would approach it with the same dedication and care that I had brought to the playground. And if anyone tried to find me for pursuing something beneficial to the community, well, I now knew exactly how to fight back. The lights were on in houses throughout the neighborhood, families settling in for the evening. It was a peaceful scene, a safe and comfortable community where people looked out for each other. That's what I had been fighting to preserve, and that's what we had ultimately achieved. One person standing up against corruption and injustice might seem like a small thing, but it can spark larger change. My story spread beyond Meadowbrook Hills, inspiring other homeowners dealing with similar situations, contributing to legislative reforms, and demonstrating that ordinary people can make a difference when they refuse to back down. The playground project had started as a simple desire to give back to my community. It had turned into a battle against corruption and abuse of power. And it had ended with justice served, reforms implemented, and a beautiful play space that would bring joy to children for years to come. That journey, with all its challenges and obstacles, had been worth every moment. As I closed my front door behind me and settled in for the evening, I felt a deep sense of contentment. I had built something that mattered. I had stood up for what was right. And I had helped transform my community into a better place. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, I was ready to face them with the same determination and integrity that had carried me through this experience. The castle playground stood strong in the Arizona night, waiting for the next day's adventures, a monument to perseverance, community spirit, and the power of one person refusing to accept injustice. And that was exactly how it should be.